Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the Select Board's meeting for Monday, Monday, September 14th, 2020. We are meeting this evening a little out of order. We had been planning an executive session on our agenda that is not needed this evening, so we will go into our regular agenda items. Folks are watching from home. Our posted agenda usually includes a coronavirus community update from our Emergency Management Director, Chief Cassidy, who's asked for an opportunity to be heard later in our meeting to accommodate some training he needed to accomplish over at the fire department. So we'll hear from him shortly. We're going to jump into the other elements of our agenda this evening and start with some warrants. If I would ask Mr. Sparrow, good evening. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing well, John. Thank you.
Read the warrants for us, please.
I have a warrant here. The warrant is for $1,513,085.73. Of that, $1,198,178.50 are payroll. So I make a motion to approve a warrant in that amount.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the warrant. Ms. Hine?
A second.
Second on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The warrant passes. A public comment this evening, Mr. Sparrow.
I do not have any public comments today. Thank
Ms.
you.
Hine?
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to Nate McMahon, Max Athey, and Joanne O'Connell, who all ran the Boston Marathon. This past week, they ran 4 times to the Milford line to total the 26.2 miles that is the Boston Marathon. Part of the virtual running that the marathon, the Boston Athletic Association has been encouraging. They completed it, so congratulations for that massive feat and how wonderful that they were able to take advantage of the trail being there for them to do this. And I wanted to point out that all 3 were running for charity, and donations can still be made for the Timothy O'Connell Foundation at going to www.timsteam.org or going to the Dana-Farber Jimmy Fund website and finding Nate Runs 2020 if you're interested in making a contribution. And again, congratulations, you've done something that I will never be able to do, which is run any more than half a mile.
Congratulations to that. That is incredible. Thank you. The only public comment I'll make this evening is relative to the school opening. As folks know, this week Holliston schools are due to open. We've been receiving a fair amount of correspondence from our partners at the schools as they get ready. I know our police chief and other stakeholders are in partnership with them to make sure it's a safe opening. Pedestrians, motorists especially, will be reminded schools' hybrid opening will commence, I believe it's this Wednesday. So keep an eye out for the kids. Make sure you drive carefully in and around our schools starting this week. We'll move on to comments from our town administrator. Mr. Ahern, good evening.
Do you want to, the public, you're all set there?
Yep. Do we have any public comment? I see none. Go ahead, Travis.
Okay, I don't unfortunately have much to add to the school update that you just gave, but I think we'll have much more to come next week, certainly. I would reiterate something we've been tracking along the way, which is the town hall door bids. Those are due for the 3rd time on Wednesday, and I am confident that we will have a positive response to that, and we should have somebody be able to be selected on Wednesday. The governance committee, as they've met with the select board multiple times, will be meeting with the finance committee tomorrow night. They are on the agenda together, and they'll do the format that they've used with the select board, where they'll come together and then they'll both have separate meetings afterwards. So that's a model that they tested out with you and seems to be working. I met this morning with the Metro West Veteran Services District, which I'm board member of 4, for the first time with that group, and nothing major to report, but certainly they are meeting the needs of our community, and I got to see them in action at 1750 where staff is housed. They are currently hiring a position, although those applications are in. I'll just reiterate a couple other things. The stipend committee was seated last week by the select board, and tentatively we have the first meeting of that scheduled for 9/24. It's a Thursday night at 7 p.m. They are still in the midst of all getting sworn in, and once they are, I will join them for their first meeting, and as they get situated, and then they can be on their way and use me as needed, but otherwise do the job as they've been tasked with. The CPC had a meeting leading up to town meeting and has set a public hearing based on the request that they've received. As far as I can tell, that is 9/23, which should be a Wednesday. And then they also have a meeting posted for 9/30, which would be the date before warrant articles are due, with the warrant currently being opened. With that, I would reiterate that we opened the warrant last week. It is currently open through October 1st, with our eyes towards an October 26th town meeting, and we will have a discussion shortly on the warrant, where we stand at the moment. And that is all I have for right now.
Did you want to make reference to the building inspector?
We can certainly do that. Unfortunately, we are losing Chris Canny, our building inspector. I'd like to thank him for his service to the town, and he's agreed to help us continue operations downstairs, so anybody doing business with the town will continue to get their needs met. With that being said, we have quite a few things on the radar when it comes to zoning and code in the town, and as such, I didn't think we could wait to fill the position, so we did post it today. Generally speaking, I've always found the greatest success we have in filling positions in municipal government is using the MMA's website, so that is the path that we went, but if anybody's listening right now, you can certainly see that position posted also on our website on the employee personnel page,
Just a quick heads up for my peers, that position was posted not long ago. Chris has been with us two years-ish. It was recently posted. The posting is relevant, and if I recall correctly, we had some competition for the position, so we would expect something similar this go around too.
I would expect good feedback. The only real substantive change to that posting from 2 years ago was just the updated pay range, and then also we just specified the technology that Chris was able to update the town with. Everything has been put online, so we would want the next person to come in to continue that good work. We want that, the ease of use from the end user, the resident or business, who's going to want to be doing things online to be able to continue to do that. So we would expect Chris's replacement to continue that work.
May I ask two
Go,
quick
please,
questions?
yes,
What is the tentative start date for a new hire in the building inspector position? Do we kind of have so Chris is going to stay on a little bit and help transition over. Do you have in your mind like when we would ideally have a new person in as a full-time building inspector?
So we're going to have a little bit of leeway in how we'd like to structure the interview process. I think, potentially having the select board and myself involved in one round rather than doing two can move the process along with getting the same amount of eyes on the process, I think, is something that we should discuss. I think what we will do in the way that we have it is that we will give preference to any applications that we receive prior to October 1st,
Okay.
at which point we will not say, don't send us your applications, but we will begin the process at that point. Go through those applications and ideally select a few to be interviewed. It's a very public-facing position. It works with the business community, the residents, and we want somebody who can obviously do the technical aspect of it, but also be customer service oriented.
Yes.
And so it's going to be a lot of personality as much as it is technical ability.
Do you envision an exit interview for our current? Okay, great. And we can talk later about who participates in the exit interview, but I think that's information that would be really valuable to have coming back through your office. Other unrelated question coming back to the governance committee comment. In your experience in Danvers and Weston, did you ever participate in the drafting of a budget message or a budget statement?
Yes, it always came through the town manager's office, and I would help him with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all. Thank you.
All set.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Anything else, Travis?
That's all I have for right now.
All right. Let's move on. The next item on the agenda would be the Front Street one-way design discussion.
I did give, I know we've had this up on the board previously, but I gave this to Chris Mayo to put up again. Thank you, Chris. So let me start this conversation by saying congratulations to everybody. We've been awarded $12,000 for one of our applications to the shared streets. Shared Street and Spaces Grant Program through Mass DOT. I know that there's been quite a bit of discussion back and forth on this, and at our meeting last week, it was sort of about to be announced. So the two crossings of 16 were not awarded. They only checked the box of safe routes to schools and not other boxes, so it wasn't given preferential treatment within that process. At the same point, we have received the tech assist work behind how that would look. So I think there's value in the fact that we put that together. Kittleson put a lot of work into those designs, and we have that information, and we can use that at our discretion. What we were awarded was the one-way design of Front Street, which is up on the board now. There were a couple iterations that had been discussed. We went back and forth, and this is, I think, the first time actually we had this up in front of people was the one-way was going the other way. So a couple things have changed substantially. Obviously, the change of a one-way is substantial. This one seems to work the best for everybody: public safety, public works, the community in that area, and the pedestrian experience. So coming off of Central Street, going towards Vine Street on Front Street, you would be a one-way. Additionally, there are a number of crosswalking changes here that we can discuss, but this is the final design that was approved. The information has been given to everybody involved, obviously. So the couple things we can discuss, and I'll turn it over to the board to discuss, but a couple things we want to look at is we're going to vote for a change, if this is still what everybody wants, a vote to change the traffic in one way, but temporarily, right? So I discussed with the clerk today that we won't be adjusting our traffic document, right, until this is a final decision. We would be voting tonight to change it as a one-way for a pilot period. I could throw out a date of December 1st, but we can talk about any date. We would want to discuss public outreach of how we're going to do this and time it with the Casey's project, parking lot project that's currently been beginning. We need to discuss how you'd like to have DPW approach the parking as you come down Front Street, because there are a couple options that we can discuss. And then we need to talk about signage so that DPW can begin to go into the signage, purchasing, and wayfinding, and how you'd like that to go.
Okay.
And so that's sort of what we need to get done tonight.
So I'm going to make a motion then, unless you'd like, oh, John, I'm sorry. I should let you call for it. Excuse me.
Can we ask some questions first?
Absolutely.
Any questions?
I think they're more general questions about just, I think the two things that I want to sort of have an understanding of about this, I mean, not the technical aspects, I mean, that's pretty straightforward to me. The first is that what do we consider, how do we consider this to be a successful exercise? Like, do we have any criteria that we could utilize? And piggybacking on that, I'd like to sort of have some sort of a mechanism or thinking about ways that residents can offer some feedback, because I think it's important that we have an understanding of like how people are feeling about this and what people's responses are, and then we could maybe some of that could be part of the input into success, if you will. So I think that's kind of those are the two things that I kind of want to have some sort of understanding of. And I mean, it might be a bigger conversation in the longer term, but I think we do need to set those parameters and have some sort of a mechanism for people to chime in if they on how they feel about it.
I agree with you. I like that idea a lot. I think if we're going to set this up, Travis, I think we should envision some kind of a portal on our website that can receive public comment or feedback during the time period that this program is underway. I think it makes sense, and I think it'd be very valuable.
I agree. I wonder too about the other option could be as a complement to a public portal to receive feedback, but a Survey Monkey's push that goes out to the community. It could be through the town website. It could be through Holliston Reporter and other ways that we broadcast information so that we can actually survey. That's a bit more work because you have to create the survey questions. But perhaps it's something we could revisit if we are not getting feedback on the portal. We would advertise both the same way. It's just one requires a little bit less effort rather, from the resident, in that they just click the link to the survey and go right there, as opposed to taking it upon themselves to find the portal on the website. But I absolutely agree that we should get feedback. We also could consider a hearing or a meeting of some sort, a public forum, where we set up a time. And I don't think it would have to necessarily be the full board, because whomever attended could bring it back to the board to present the information, but we could do something by Zoom where we invite the public on a certain date and ask for comment at that point in time too. I've always felt that the signage is going to drive the most conversation. When you talk to different organizations and groups in town, there's been a long-standing effort to get signage to direct people to and from Blair Square and the businesses in downtown and vice versa, and in the area. And so I have a feeling we're going to hear a lot of ideas about what the signs could and should be. So those are 3 ideas, I think, for feedback. One is a portal, one would be a survey, and the third would be a meeting of some sort to request information.
So I have heard from the people most affected in this area, including a business, and I think, and I wouldn't say that everybody is just 100% on board, but I think everybody has come to the understanding that as a pilot this makes sense, right? We try it out. If it absolutely doesn't work, we can always go back. But that this area is problematic as it currently sits, with some, there's the functionality is
It's very kludgy.
and so I think that there is an optimism that this is a solution to something that currently exists, and what can come out of it. So I would say that there has already been direct lines of communication with people who live or work in this particular area already, and that in each of those conversations, the term pilot has come up to say, if you experience problems, I would expect to hear from them directly, but we can certainly put a portal to, or come up with a solution to hear from a wider audience than just the most affected. And then to that effect as well, I think this was stated by Tina at a previous meeting when we were talking about these ideas in general and how this works, is that to a certain extent, the idea behind shared streets and spaces, the public comment period really is the pilot period, right? And until we hear people actually interacting with the idea, or their experience interacting with the idea, that's where we're going to get the most information. And so I'm certainly open to any of the 3 ideas. We can certainly try to work them all.
So I have a question, maybe it's for you, Tina, and forgive me, it's probably a detail that should have been brought up earlier, but regarding the crosswalk, is the area in front of the Lex Auto Part, as this crosswalk seems to cut right directly in front of the front door, is that public property all the way up to the front door?
No, it's actually now owned by Ed Daniels of Vesta Realty, and it's the Rail Trail Snack Shop. So Lex Auto Parts is no longer...
The building, well,
yeah,
okay.
Right, okay. So he was, so Tom Smith, I think, certainly Sean Reese, Peter Barbieri, and myself, not Tom Smith, excuse me, the 3 of us walked out there and took a look, and Ed indicates that his property line is, his property boundary is sort of where you see the tip of that triangle. So it is not town property, is my understanding. We can get clarification on that, but.
So you're directing public pedestrian traffic onto private property for some stretch, right? They're going to cross in front of his building to get to the Winthrop Street sidewalk, correct? Was there any thought put into moving the crosswalk further up and narrowing the amount of stretch of land or street that pedestrians would have to cross, closer to Central Street, for example? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
To avoid that private property intersection.
I would I think part of the idea of the shared streets and spaces right now is that is one of the, that triangle, right, actually incorporating that into it, I think was actually part of the concept.
Right. It's
right.
The idea is a streetery, so you create a space, you give people access to that space where they can congregate. In this case, with the rail trail shop, they can purchase inside, come out and eat outside. So I'm imagining a follow-up conversation with the owner of that property to say, how would you use this space to allow people to congregate and enjoy the food that they've just purchased at your building outside? So the point was to give access to that space, that triangular shape, as well as define it so that it's clear to automobiles that that's not a space for vehicular travel.
And the area, last question to you, the area closer to the trail side where the crosswalk enters the trail, when we had Kevin Conley in, we asked him about the design of Blair Square. Does this location of the crosswalk, is it become complementary to the Blair Square design?
Well, actually, so you were just on the call. I'm not sure how far along the design process they are. We did ask, if I recall correctly, we did ask Kevin that question, and his comment back to the board was there's no issue, that this does not alter their plans as an access point. I'm not sure, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, that their designs are so far down the road that they actually have identified exactly where entrances to the park will be, the square will be off of Front Street.
Yeah, I think people are comfortable with most of the plan of the of Blair Square, other than the structure. But I don't think it's. I mean, there's nothing set in stone physically, so that certainly there's a fluidity to where that crosswalk could be.
Can I just mention one thing? So that one of the things I was saying with the parking, I think would impact potentially what the Blair Square Committee is working with in terms of setbacks or frontage kind of. So if you look at the parking right now, one thing that sort of needs to be settled in the DPW's mind, and they're looking for direction from the board now that this has been awarded, is how that parking would be. So if you're just using the street and the current paved as is and saying, well, now this is one lane, so we can draw lines in what used to be enough space for two cars because now we just need one, that leaves more room for the Blair Square Committee's right to sort of work with, quote unquote. At the same point, that's we're painting temporary lines. That works with the pilot. There's also enough money. I would say $12,000 left us enough room to sort of do what the board wants, to sort of claim some space next to what is currently paved. So as people aren't parking in mud, there could be gravel or something to that effect. Again, a temporary solution, but not taking up current road space to make parking. It's really where you want the parking to be in the pilot program, right? Lining the current street at the angle that they've put here. So as you turn down, you're then pulling into a spot. You back up and continue on. Or if we wanted it a little bit further to the side, that would then potentially impact the frontage of the Blair Square and what they're working with. Short and long-term question, I guess.
Okay.
I think I hear you say two different things, or bring up two different issues. So I'll just add my understanding to this. Blair Square Committee is looking for as much square footage to create green space to use in the square as possible. That said, I would not put the parking spaces into gravel, dirt. I would keep it on the pavement. As long as the pavement is matching up with what Kittleson put down on paper in terms of two 11-foot lanes. So I'm just looking right now for that information. But assuming that's the case, that's marked out as 11 feet lane.
The two 11-feet lanes maybe on the next
existing
page.
conditions.
I thought it was 11-foot lane, and then there was like a 7-foot pedestrian.
Let me just get that information up, because I just want to make
If it
sure.
was with this slide, I think Chris actually has it.
Yep.
Chris, can you just slide down? This?
Yes, correct. So I believe this is existing conditions, and
Yep.
you see two 11-foot travel lanes. I would argue that we want to leave as much open space, green space, available for the Blair Square Committee to play with, that we don't want to go into that space for parking. The other thing that I'd say on the opposite side is travel, the speed of a vehicle is determined in part by what they see in front of them. If they see a wider section of road, they're probably going to travel a little bit faster. So by keeping it 11 feet and putting parked cars closer to the 11-foot travel lane, you're going to get better compliance with speed. So for those two reasons, and I'm not sure if I'm arguing with you or against you or just shouting out into the wind here.
Just looking for direction.
I would say let's keep the travel lane 11 feet. And let's give the Blair Square Committee the green space that they want and not claim it for parking, in this pilot at least. That would be my point in terms of direction on where to put the parking spots. Does that help or not help? I feel like
It does. I mean, I
Walked a
like
wide
the idea
circle
that this is a fluid thing.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we recognize that. Ben's comment, I think, hits the nail on the head. Let's give citizens a chance to feedback, all feedback to us. And we're not going to tell you how to design the survey or the public feedback, but I think using our website, Travis, would be a great place to capture any feedback over the next 12 months.
Good.
And then we can make adjustments after that, right? I'm just grateful of getting something off the ground here.
So the pilot period is going to be a little bit shorter than that, though.
Oh, okay.
So we're looking, we have to report back to the state relatively quickly. So I would say if the select board wants to go ahead with this pilot, we would vote to change to a one-way on Front Street tonight through, let's say, December 1st. We can always vote to extend that as you see
Okay.
fit. At that point, I would be coming back to you to say, here is sort of what I have to date. If the community wants to go ahead with a long-term, this is the answer at that point. If more information is required, that's fine too. But we do need to, at that point, report to the state and say, we put it up, this is what we used, this is what we acquired for it, these are the costs that we incurred, and close out the grant. It is a quick-moving grant. We still then have leeway. Everything we're buying, we're keeping, right? So this another conversation I had with Tom Smith was to say any sort of barriers that we need to make this in the short term, make sure we're procuring something that works for our DPW in the long run.
When do we need to make that report, the final report back to the state?
I believe the reporting mechanism has me getting back to them by the end of December. Again, that doesn't mean that we've told them we're keeping it permanent. It just means we did this, we're collecting information.
Mm-hmm.
We did what you gave us the money to do, which was pilot this.
Right.
At that point, if the board still wants more information, wants to
Understand.
leave it in place for another 6 months, we can have that internal conversation.
So they're just looking for, the state is just looking for basically feedback that we did the thing. They're not looking for,
That you implemented it.
that we just implemented. That's really all they're looking for,
Yeah.
right?
They
Okay.
gave us points if we reasonably thought this would be a permanent solution, right? That was the point in the grading mechanism, was if you thought it was going to be permanent, but that's about it. I mean, now it's in our
Okay.
hands.
Okay. Can we just define the pilot period? You
So again, the
mentioned
pilot
December
period
1.
for them is the reporting, which is due at the end of this calendar year.
What I mean to say is out to the residents, we're going
Oh.
to define the pilot period as we had heard from DPW that they wanted to see weather, the impact of winter weather. December 1 seems a little soon for me in terms of getting us some snow on the ground, but I'm kind of interested to hear what you all think in terms of when is this pilot, when are we going to tell residents that this pilot period is over and we are looking to transition back because it was unsuccessful or to permanent because it was successful?
So again, I need to report to them on their time frame. Your time frame is up to you.
Yeah, it seems that each item is mutually exclusive. We can define the pilot period to April 1st if we would choose to, and then undo what we've done. He's got to report back, it sounds like, in just over 3 months on
Right.
the implementation of the program. So I'm fine with giving it 6 months from now or something along that line to get us through a winter season.
Okay.
And then having a report back through the public feedback and any other mechanism to let us know, is this great, or do we need to make some modifications?
No, I think that's helpful. So you're thinking 6 months because we're certainly going to get.
What are you thinking?
I love it. I mean,
6
truly,
months?
I see this going permanent. So 6 months is great.
No, before you get that pilot feedback.
I think 6 months is
So
fantastic.
April 1st or something like that?
Yep.
You good with that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Because
for
I
me.
think that gives us something to tell residents when we start fielding questions about it. Well, how long is this going to be in place? We can, I'd like
Right.
to have a consistent message on that. So I like
Agreed,
that.
yeah.
Okay, and then I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't mind having Sean Reese contact the owner of the Rail Trail Snack Shop, because there may be some sort of coordination on that triangular space where feedback, or have you reach out to Ed Daniels,
Oh, well.
and he can get a hold of you or I or Sean, and just to keep that line of communication open. Because that one design piece is certainly for the benefit of the
Right.
business in that area.
And to that point, Ed was on our calls with Kittleson multiple times.
Mhm.
So he's quite aware of
Got it.
everything going on.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the one-way conversion of Front Street as presented on the drawing this evening.
Through April 1st.
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second, and with a comment that we would clarify that it is a southwesterly, one-way southwesterly along Front Street to Vine, central to Vine. So the direction of travel again is southwesterly.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All set on that, Travis?
Well said, thank you.
Next on our agenda is a warrant discussion from the town administrator.
Yes, so this is a little preliminary, and I think I just want to cover a couple things, including what I plan on getting into next week as well, which will be warrant language. For this week, what I've provided to you is sort of a comparison of special town meeting last year with special town meeting as it is currently shaping up. And reiterate, as I mentioned before, that the warrant is currently open. CPC is meeting, and they will have a few things for us as well. But as of right now, the first 6 articles, would remain the same as October 2019 town meeting, which is the stabilization fund, capital expenditure fund, sale of surplus equipment, the capital budget, Article 4, Article 5, fund transfer to affect the tax rate, and Article 6, Community Preservation Fund. Those are pretty much standard carried from year to year. At this point last year, there were quite a number of different things, and that's where this diverges. And so I'll just reiterate the articles that I currently have based on discussions that we've had to this point. And you can put anything on my radar that you would like, and then next week I will bring back language and we can look at this rather than a list format in a document format. So after those top 6, which again just remain flat from last year, and we'll get into detail on, I have sidewalk prioritization plan and study. I have the water asset management plan, which includes source information that we're looking for from a consultant. I have a water pipe replacement study, but I'm looking for clarification on that. Is that a part of the water asset management plan or a standalone? Ben, I know this was a discussion that you were having. Are those two part of the same, or are they separate articles to be discussed? I have language on one.
I mean, I personally, my colleagues here might feel a little differently, but I think putting them together would be a good idea, in the sense that I think what we need to be doing is looking at a strategic plan for water in the future, including modernization of the entire, the modernization of the system, when part of that would be water sourcing, sourcing other opportunities and wells and things like that.
Okay. So
personally, I would say that, but I don't know how others would feel about that.
Why don't we, if in the interest of the fact that you're going to report back to us next week, I think, right?
Sure, yes.
On the status of that work.
Yep.
Why don't we hold on doing that and keep them separate for now?
Okay.
Just because they've been that way. But if you develop an idea that strategically accomplishes some goals, then let's listen to that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But to be clear, Travis, I think the water asset management plan is a separate separate study to look at new wells for the town of Holliston. The water pipe replacement study is an effort to look at accelerating the 1 mile per year that we do now up to 3 potentially. So their only commonality is that it's a water delivery system article.
Mm-hmm.
One requires more of a comprehensive study or review of our existing infrastructure and what we still have to do. The other one is a cyclical source study that Sean explained. Every 10 years, the town needs to start looking for new water sources. So that's what that one's all about.
Right. And I was going to mention also that I will have on the agenda for next week, Ben, to have a follow-up discussion that the select board had at a previous meeting.
Mhm.
So we can get back into that and be in depth, and if I get any sort of language between now and then, I can incorporate that in what we'll look at next week. The water main replacement for Winter Street is the next up on Sean Reese's list. So I will have the language there. That's the standard, as we discussed, as much as we're doing per year. That is 2.4 million currently, the quote that I have, and a balance that those projects are funded through the infrastructure fee specifically, as opposed to water retained earnings. And that project I'll give you all the backup on and what that hits. It does tie into another article that I have here to discuss that is coming from Tom Smith and Sean Reese, and I'll have the backup on as well, which is roadway drainage and sidewalk improvements in Mudville. This is above and beyond Chapter 90 funding in the area, as well as the Winter Street project. So whereas the water main replacement will tear up the street and replace the street to make a completion of the area and the project that will do, they are looking at all of the funding they have available through Chapter 90, through their budget for capital roadway improvements, and saying that they're about $353,000 short to complete the entire project. I would also say that one of the conversations that we had with a vendor in the area who has poles was to say, if we're going to do sidewalks in that area, we would really like their help in coordinating that project. I can give you all the backup. Sean has presented me with warrant language on this and all the numbers, so I'll be bringing that back next week and we can talk in depth. But if there's anything in the meantime, feel free to reach out. Stormwater management is an article that is relatively recurring. This is related to the MS4 stormwater permitting that comes from the EPA. Common term for the MS4 is what we've all heard, the unfunded mandate, classic example. This has affected pretty much every community in the Commonwealth in the country. We're staying ahead of it and in relatively good position so long as we continue our engineering studies and reporting to the EPA on those through the DEP. Two other articles I would bring up that had been previously discussed that are on my radar, and then obviously anything else on your radar that you'd like to share with me. The revolving fund for energy revenues was one that got dropped off of the July warrant. It is related to the solar project at Marshall. I think I did have a discussion with the Finance Committee on this briefly. I think the way that the article had sort of come about was a little bit, it was trying to alter the way a revolving fund would work normally, to make it, to remove some of the guardrails. I think just a standard revolving fund, so long as the town is sort of isolating these revenues, is really the idea. If we stop the revenues from simply going to the general fund and becoming part of that mix as sort of, let's say, motor vehicle excise is, once they get built in, it's very difficult to then sort of segregate them in the future. So if we don't do it off the bat, again, I'll be sort of taking the language that had been presented in a previous discussion and probably reverting this more towards a normal revolving fund, and bringing that back, and we can have that discussion once you see the language. And then the pension stabilization fund was one that was dropped. I would say at this point, I'll probably not be bringing it back unless there's a desire from the board, and having this discussion more towards May 21. I've discussed this with Mary, who is a proponent of it. She's comfortable with the May timeline, bringing that conversation back, and I have had a discussion with the two liaisons from the Finance Committee and the liaison from the board to the pension conversation. And I think, between now and May, we certainly will entertain this idea, come up with any ideas on the table, and bring them back to the board, probably on the May timeline. So that's what I'm tracking at the moment. Is there anything you know of that should be added?
Well, I think the governance committee's cooking up some ideas, so you might want to put a placeholder in for a GC article, content to be determined.
Okay.
They've talked about that.
That would probably be bylaw changes, correct? Are you thinking?
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, okay.
Yeah. That's what they've said.
Okay.
To the extent that there may be some articles involved with traffic issues this fall, just we don't know what the content is yet, but you may want to flag something that may involve town meeting involvement / vote. I would just call it traffic impact article. Some
Great.
feedback?
Oh, good.
No, I would just add, so it related it to the capital that has now been sent to the board and the finance committee to begin review and the conversation that will continue once we have language next week. The only traffic related thing that I currently have is a TAC, the Traffic Advisory Committee capital request for signs and equipment. I think, a separate article related specific to some of the things that I'm currently researching and will be bringing back to the board on Lowland and the other side of town as well. I'll absolutely put a placeholder there for that.
Sorry, that TAC equipment article, do you see that living under Article 2 right now, or as a capital
Under
request
Article
in
4,
Article 2?
I have under Article 4, I have two things that could, in normal times, be their own separate articles.
Sorry, Article 4.
The TAC, public safety signs and equipment, as was discussed in the TAC public meeting for $40,000. I could see it under capital, under the
Okay.
capital request, but it could also be its own separate article.
So you haven't made up your mind at this point?
I think
right
the
now.
board direction on that, we're not,
Okay.
at the moment, while the warrant is still open and we haven't received a ton from the public or other boards and committees, it may make sense to have it separate. If we start to get too many and we're trying to save time and space, it certainly would be appropriate to keep it in capital, because that is the request it is.
Okay,
There's another one also, which is 9 Green Street Design Planning.
right.
That's one that, under normal circumstances, I'd probably just want the town meeting to have a full conversation on. We could certainly present all of the information and keep it in capital, which is where I currently have it. But again, normal circumstances, it certainly would warrant its own article.
I agree.
Warrant its own warrant article.
I think I'd like to see it as its own article.
Okay.
I think it's a significant project that has a major impact on how center of town will function, and there's a history there too. I think it's something we should draw out a little bit more attention to. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We are expecting to at least have some numbers on the cost of design and planning within the next 10 days.
Okay.
Do you have any comments on articles, Ben?
No, not at this time. I think it seems reasonable, and I at this point, I do think we want to keep things fairly tight, not too many articles, but it looks like we're pretty much on that pace as it is.
John, I just had one more question for
Sure.
Travis. Do you anticipate anything coming by way of an article for the water treatment plant?
An additional appropriation? Is it,
I thought we
At
already
this-
approved something in the.
yeah,
when
at
we
this
did the
time,
rates.
he has the approval for the borrowing of the amount. If that amount were to exceed the appropriation, we could potentially, I'm not aware of anything
Okay.
to that effect
Okay,
at the moment. He's in the SRF process.
Yep.
Sean has put the application into the SRF for that. So, no, I'm not aware of anything at the moment.
okay. All right.
Travis, there was an article last October relative to dam inspections, repairs, and ownership. I'd like to go back a little bit, have you do some research on the dams in Holliston. At my time on the board, we've evaluated 4 of them. We paid a consultant to give us an evaluation of the condition, and all of them are in poor condition. There was some, if I recall correctly, you might have some recollection too, Tina, there was some feedback that we could release some of the dams or reclaim them.
Winthrop Street.
But
Sorry, Lake Winthrop.
yeah, and I honestly can't remember if we left off with the notion that we needed to fund some of those solutions, or is it just administrative progress we need to make with the state? I know there are some grants available for these types of things, so I'm just asking a rhetorical question for you to look a little deeper into where we stood after that vote on the condition of the 4 very poor dams and the liability that they present to us.
So that was Article 18 of the October 2019 town meeting,
It was
Right.
and it was dam inspections, repairs, and ownership,
$40,000 or $45,000.
$45,000. Yeah.
So
So I have, sorry, go ahead.
I just would think that it would be good to have presented the invoices that have come in, an understanding of what has been paid out of that $45,000, which should speak to the work that was done.
And what's next?
Yeah, and what's next, exactly.
So I've had a few conversations so far with our sustainabilities coordinator and conservation agent.
Matt's on our call tonight, actually.
Yeah, and so I think at this point, all of the documentation that was sitting in the town administrator's office from Paul to Jeff, we've sort of put together, including what conservation has, but the actual $45,000 in that appropriation, I have not got into at the moment, so I will do that and certainly bring it back.
Okay.
I think a plan was, certainly to come out of that, and we should check where we are, so I will do that.
Great. All right. I think that concludes the board's feedback on where we stand with the warrant as of today.
Okay. And so I will keep you updated if I get anything with the warrant open. Otherwise, next week, I will begin to bring the language to you for discussion.
Now, have you reached out to the planning board and some of the other boards in town to the extent that they may have interest in putting articles in? Because sometimes their business feeds into the warrant from through your office. Are they aware the warrant is open and we're soliciting? Okay.
So everybody is aware that it's open. I would say, generally speaking, the way the town has operated is to consider bylaw and zoning amendments in May. That's not always the case. There's certainly instances where that hasn't been. The only item that I was tracking, and I don't think it's going anywhere, was a request on 555 specifically to look at the height. I think the town may want to do that, but certainly at this point I haven't seen anything that would indicate something would be ready to be discussed on the timeline of October.
Sure.
And as we discussed earlier, losing our building inspector, who is also very intricately involved in zoning, probably would hurt our ability to seriously contemplate that in this timeline.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Travis, as a point of order, would you kindly instruct Mike Cassidy to be prepared to come back at our next meeting and talk about fall special town meeting planning? I think this board's had some conversations about the timing of town meeting. I recall having conversations with Mike weeks and weeks ago about the strategic necessities and plans to pull off a special town meeting in a school structure. There were some challenges associated with that. I'd like to, because we'll be about a month out next week, I'd like to check in with him, find out from a emergency management perspective what's in front of us, what kind of challenges do we have. And in addition, for my colleagues, one of the things I'd like to do is bring our elected officials a little closer to our decision-making on the fall town meeting. Perhaps we can talk next week about scheduling the state representative, and the Senate president, and perhaps even our congresswoman, to the extent that she might be able to join us and give us some insight on both the federal relief package that the state's been waiting for and any updates that the state can share with us. I think before we make any decisions about keeping that date or moving that date, having both emergency management and financial updates will make us a little bit better prepared.
What is the timeline we have for being able to make a decision on the date?
I believe we have some great flexibility on that, Travis.
We do. So I had actually asked the chief for an update on that. I think the way that we sort of left it was one of the check-in points is going to be the school opening. Once there was clarity on that, which I think within this week we'll obviously have that clarity, is going to be to say, now we can talk reality of meeting on a Monday night as opposed to a weekend, meeting in a school as opposed to a non-school, and that really hinged on what happened this week. The timeline of when we need to post the warrant, obviously document production is a logistical concern, but in terms of the actual bylaw, the warrant needs to be posted 7 days ahead of time. One issue that did come up that the chief was watching closely was the amount of time, the lead time to change quorum, which was a concern of his leading into July, which was that the board would need to discuss that they were going to potentially change a quorum within a week,
Right.
and then that meeting then would have to be a week ahead of time, so there was that amount of lead time. But in reality, when we sit down on Monday, we still have a fair amount of time to decide, if we're going to keep it in October, if we want to just change the date to a weekend, if we're going to look beyond that. where we are not yet under the gun, I guess.
The timing kind of coincides with the warrant, because the warrant is scheduled to close 10/1, right?
Right.
Yeah, so. You guys good with that?
Mhm.
So
If
looking
the
ahead a
warrant-
little bit.
If the warrant closes 10/1 though, again, and we were to push this out, the
Keep
warrant
it
can
open.
be reopened. Yep.
Understood, yeah. All set with this?
All
Anything
good.
else on the warrant, Travis?
No, again, I will be updating all this. All of the capital information that I've given you will have backup sheets sent to you and the Finance Committee shortly. And then we will get into warrant language starting next week.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Any questions on the warrant discussion from the town administrator on our Zoom call? Hearing none, we will move on. Next item on our agenda, we're going to wait for our chief to come in to deal with the coronavirus updates. We'll go to our board business. Ben, I'm guessing you have some paperwork down there regarding some appointments and gifts.
Yes,
Would you like
so.
to start with the appointment for the Council on Aging?
See if I have any. Nope. Okay. So we have somebody for a Kathleen Anguish,
Mm-hmm.
who would like to be becoming a full member of the Council of Aging. She is an associate member for the past year, and she wants to be a full member.
Good evening, Bob Malone. I see you on our call. Do you wish to be heard regarding this Council on Aging appointment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to say to the board is that on behalf of the Council on Aging, I'm very pleased to recommend to you the appointment of Holliston resident Kathy Anguish to the vacancy created by the recent resignation of Lois Hosmer. Kathy's been active in several activities at the Senior Center for some time. She expressed an interest in learning more about how the council worked to support the staff in the center. We suggested she join as an associate member, which is an appointment that the board can make. She joined 2 years ago and has been attending meetings faithfully since that time. When Lois retired, we began the process of searching for candidates to fill a vacant position. We asked if any of the associate members were interested in moving up. Kathy expressed an interest, and at our last regular meeting, she was nominated and unanimously voted to be recommended to you for the appointment to the vacant position.
Wonderful. Any questions on the proposed appointment of Ms. Kathleen Anguish to the Council on Aging?
No?
You
Nope,
good?
just like to thank her for volunteering.
Indeed, thank you. I have one question, Bob. With Kathleen's ascension to the regular council, will you folks be exploring the need for an additional associate to fill her vacancy?
Yes, Mr. Cronin. The bylaws of the council do not specify a number of associates, so we're free to have as many as we think can contribute to productive discussions with us. The only prohibition for an associate member is that they are not allowed to vote in formal votes of the council, but they fully participate in conversations and debate and so forth. We do have 2 individuals in the community who've already expressed an interest in knowing more about the council, and we've suggested that they join us at the next meeting with the possibility of joining as associate members. So we're always looking for associate members, because it's a good way for people to get acquainted with the work of the council, and also for us to identify individuals in the community who might be interested in serving as vacancies occur.
Sounds great, Bob, and I'm guessing through those words you're making the attempt to recruit more, so have at it. I think it's great. So with that, I will entertain a motion to appoint Ms. Kathleen Anguish to the Council on Aging.
Move to appoint Kathleen Anguish to the Council on Aging.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Bob, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You're up, Ben, for the gifts.
All right, so first we have, get this in the right order, there we go. So we have a gift of $100 to the fire department from the Mohawk Path residents. It has it's an unrestricted gift. That's all the information that I have.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the $100 donation from the Mohawk Path residents to the fire gift account.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That
Aye.
carries. The next one, Ben.
So the next one we have is also for the fire department from the American Legion. It is a gift in honor of first responders in lieu of the 9/11 award ceremony, and it is for $500.
I'll accept the motion to accept the $500 gift to the fire gift account from the American Legion Post 47.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
And the last gift we have here is also from the American Legion, Post 47, to our police department in lieu of the 9/11 award ceremony in honor of first responders to the police department for $500.
I will accept the motion to accept the $500 gift to the police gift account on behalf from the American Legion Post 47.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, that does that.
It was a very nice ceremony on Friday. Mr. Sparrow attended. We did it up front. It was quick, but it was nice. And thank you to Steve Bradford and Walter McGrath for that ceremony.
Excellent, thank you. Travis, we've approached the end of our agenda. We are awaiting Chief Cassidy. Is he close? And if he
Texted.
is, we can take a brief 5-minute recess.
Why don't we do that?
So why don't we do that? If you would be so kind to allow us to come back on camera, give us about 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll rejoin the meeting momentarily. Thank you. Good evening, Holliston. We're back. It would appear our fire chief is busy training officers over at the fire department this evening, and thus we may not be receiving his update. However, we do have some information to share relative to the coronavirus. Mr. Ahern, do you have those numbers available that were publicly posted today? I know as of today we have 5 active cases, bringing the total number of cases in Holliston to 75. Again, our numbers represent a decent level.
We are in yellow. I was actually going to update. I just pulled this up on the Board of Health. If I can just start with that, and then I'll go find that information.
Sure.
So the information coming from the Board of Health related to their flu clinics is that after much consideration, they've decided to cancel this year's flu clinics. Clinics were initiated years ago when pharmacists couldn't give shots and continued as excellent community service events. However, during this pandemic, having a large gathering and is more challenging, creating additional risk when flu shots are available at any pharmacy. The Board of Health is meeting tomorrow night, I want to say. Let me just pull up that information so we can give it. Their meeting on Tuesday night is at 7 o'clock, is posted online. And so they will get into more of this information. But it was obviously a difficult decision for them. And what their plan going forward is going to be will be discussed tomorrow night at their event. Any questions on that from the board?
None at this time.
Okay.
I
Getting
think
back to, sorry?
Yeah, what we were looking, when we speak to Mike, we'll be looking to talk to him a little bit about updates on reporting costs to the state, as well as any updates from schools relative to reopening, CARES Act, and so forth. Those are the areas that I think we should be focusing on with him when we do talk to him.
Okay, and the information that you updated on the 75 is the most up-to-date information that I have, and he is now interacting with the Maven system. And I'm not sure if he had other requests due to for the CARES Act, so those will have to wait until next week.
Okay. Any comments on that, Mr. Sparrow?
Not at this time, thank you.
So if I understand you correctly, you anticipate tomorrow there'll be discussion at the Board of Health meeting. There'll be discussion about eliminating town flu clinics.
Yes, I think the concern will be for underinsured individuals that I think they'll be discussing how to handle that. Obviously, CVS would handle that slightly differently than a flu clinic would have, so I believe that they'll have something in place to make sure that people are covered. But otherwise, the thought process behind it is that it's become somewhat of a community event, bringing people together, and this time we're sort of going for the opposite due to COVID.
Right.
So obviously the Board of Health's main priority is making sure people do get those shots, so I think they're trying to think outside the box, but at the same point, the actual flu clinic event that they've been holding historically, they just don't feel this is the right year for it.
So you anticipate they'll have some discussion tomorrow night about how to
Make sure everybody's has
yeah,
access.
okay, all right. Fill gaps or whatever they end up deciding they need to do to address the public health concerns with the flu when they are eliminating the flu clinic.
Yes.
Okay. And their meeting tomorrow night is at 7 p.m.?
It is.
Okay, and the information, if you want to participate, is on the town website with their agenda, I would assume.
Yes, it is.
Where it usually is. Okay, thank you.
Any other business, Mr. Sparrow?
Nope.
Ms. Hine?
There's one thing I'd like to bring up. I was twice requested, both times by the same resident, to consider, would the board consider holding a forum during which time residents could have presented to them the traffic studies for both 194 Lowland Street and 555 Hoppingbrook. That the data is quite detailed, and for a layperson it's complicated. And so would the town consider a public forum with a presentation of the information in the traffic studies? I said I would bring it to the board for consideration during new business. It's a complicated affair to hold a forum like that or a meeting like that to share this information. I had a quick conversation with our IT director, Chris Mayo, about how one would do that, and it would really be better served with a sort of PowerPoint presentation as opposed to putting the documents up there and scrolling through them. That would not work well in a virtual meeting. I would ask that if we were to go down that path, that we consider asking the engineering firm that does the peer reviews on behalf of the town of Holliston to perhaps prepare a presentation to share the information with the community if we were to decide to do this. The one concern I would have in considering this would be what comes out of the traffic studies. When you take a look at them, they are generally done for the benefit of the person who is requesting the traffic study, in which case that's the developer. And so my impression is that our traffic studies that are presented to us often don't answer a lot of the questions I think will come out of this type of a meeting. One such question would probably be, how do we know how many trucks are passing through the town of Holliston as opposed to visiting an industrial park? Those questions aren't answered in any traffic study that we're going to be able to present to the community. And so if we were to consider something like this, I think that we should be prepared to hear comments that we don't have answers for. And that may then put us in a place where we're needing to
Any thoughts on that,
address
Mr.
that.
Sparrow?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand the contents of those studies. I've seen them, and I can't make heads or tails of them. And I consider myself to be a fairly intelligent human. But the fact is that I want it to be, to your point, I want it to be a productive exercise. And I think it would be, I think, what would be the goals of such? I mean, certainly sharing information with the public, I think, is an important one, but I don't necessarily know if all of us on the board, like, we have to have a formal hearing to be able to accomplish that. But I'd want to understand what would we want to see to come of that. And I think one of the things that I'd like to wait for before we do anything like that is to have to hear a little bit more about what our options are for Lowland Street, to sort of understand, because even with the context of having a traffic study, what are we going to do? Like, what could we do? What should we do? What do we do? Like, I don't want it to just necessarily be a PowerPoint presentation and then everybody says the same things that they said at Lowland Street, which is incredibly insightful and important to hear, but I just don't know if it's necessarily productive for problem solving. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to sharing the information and having. I just don't know what that looks like. I just don't really understand.
What I would say to that is I think there could be two benefits. I'm on the fence about this because, like you, I would want it to be productive and purposeful. I could see that it would serve the purpose of clarifying information presented to the community. We are hearing numbers across the board in terms of how many, let's just say, how many trucks could be in and out of an industrial park. We are hearing that number very widely at least I am, when I'm being approached by community members. I'm not going to call it misinformation because that's not what it is.
It's incomplete.
Right, and so there could be the benefit of having information presented clearly, concisely, and it's a point of reference. Like, this was presented at this point in time, this is the information that we're acting on. The other benefit that I would see would be that it could direct future efforts in the town. I'm thinking of something like the Traffic Advisory Committee in sort of identifying where we need to do more study in order to holistically address the impact of truck traffic in this case.
Yeah.
We may need to direct future efforts for traffic studies in this particular area. And as the town, we may need to be the ones requesting that traffic study to serve our purposes.
Right.
So I see those two hanging in the balance as one benefit, but I think, like the two of you, I'm a bit on the fence. I don't mind waiting on this. The resident who's asked me twice about it is just sort of fleshing out the idea.
Yeah.
And I said I'd bring it to the board for consideration. If we need to wait for more information, and I don't think we have anything incredibly pressing at this point in time in terms of...
Well, there is.
Okay, go for it.
I don't dispose of the idea, but I don't feel as though the timing is in sync with what I see lies ahead for us to make some decisions on some of these projects at Lowland, Hopping Brook, and so forth. Tomorrow morning, Travis and I have a call with Rep. Dykema and MassDOT folks to talk about state road projects that you all know we prioritized and sent correspondence up for a couple of months ago. And part of that list also includes some of the traffic issues that have, commercial traffic issues that have surfaced since that letter was sent. I spoke to the representative today, and we both agree that the traffic issues are probably going to dominate a big part of the conversation. And because MassDOT is a significant partner with the town on some of this planning, I think we need to take that step, Tina.
Sure.
Find out what is required of the town to start engaging some solutions and putting them forward to the town for consideration. Could that include the need for the town to fund its own traffic studies? This is similar, I think, to what you were getting to, specific to any of these projects. Could it include more public meetings? In that case, we would bring in the studies and so forth. There's some uncertainty that lies ahead, and I don't want to just jump on the idea of having a public forum to discuss something that is seemingly one-sided. It was drafted for the purposes of one argument. So let's stick with what appears to be the plan, and that is vet our issues through our state partners and find out what logical next steps await us. We will share that information with the public so that they understand what we're doing, but it starts tomorrow. So that's my thinking.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate your comments.
Can I make one other quick comment? I think one thing that's a little frustrating about these particular studies is that, to John's point, they are one-sided, and I think one of the things that we need to have is sort of a more of a holistic view of some of the traffic issues, because when we hear some of these numbers thrown around, is that a 5% increase in traffic? Is it a 100% increase in traffic? And I don't want to diminish the impact, but some people see these numbers and people get very concerned, and probably rightfully so. But we want to kind of understand the larger context and have sort of a town position, because I think one of the challenges is that we hear these numbers, everybody panics, and instead of saying like, okay, well, this would only represent a 5% increase in traffic or something like that, and having some sort of a town idea of some of the bigger, the bigger picture traffic issues might be beneficial before we have some of those conversations specifically to these projects.
And
that's my opinion.
I'm perfectly comfortable reaching back out to the resident and saying, if you have specific questions, send them my way. I'm more than happy to get the answers on their behalf, and then hold off on anything more public than that until we have some more information, a bit more of a formed plan. I think that's
there
great.
might very well be a moment where that lands in what we're trying to do.
Okay.
It just doesn't feel like it right now.
Yep, fair enough. Yep.
All right, I was getting ready to adjourn, and then the emergency manager appeared, so.
Does he have any other business?
We moved on.
Let's bring the chief in. It's a matter of public concern. We gave our best public update, but if you have any deets to share with the good people of Holliston, we'll take you out of order and make you camera ready, so as the case may be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do apologize to the board. I was involved in a very spirited and engaged discussion with the fire officers back at the station. It's been our first officers meeting since January, so there was a lot of content and a lot of opinions.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Doesn't it, though? But we're on camera now to discuss coronavirus. I wouldn't want to discuss something that's not on the agenda. So in terms of, we've got one new case that was reported to us today, which brings us up to a total of 75. 68 have recovered. 2 COVID-related deaths, which occurred very early on, and which leaves us with 5 active cases. My messaging is the same as it has been for 6 months. Wash your hands, wear face coverings, maintain physical distancing, avoid large crowds. And I do want to draw attention to the fact that we are now at the 6-month mark since I came to the board and asked for an emergency declaration. Which,
is it March 13th?
My initial briefing was Wednesday, March 11th, and then it was the 16th of March, which was the following Monday when I asked for the board for the declaration.
I'd like to call Uncle.
Yeah, it seems like yesterday.
I'd like to end this piece.
Because if you remember, I told you on March 11th, if we could just take a couple weeks and flatten the curve, things would go much smoother if we just implemented all of these mitigation strategies.
That worked.
It did, absolutely.
Now we're on.
We're pretty flat right now. But in those 6 months, we have informed public officials, we have educated the public, we've consulted with the Board of Health, we've acquired a lot of PPE, we've distributed a lot of PPE, and we're stockpiling PPE. We have coordinated the CARES Act application and spending, and we're ramping up for the reporting for next week. We have helped with the logistics for the annual town meeting, for graduation, two of the largest gatherings of individuals in our community during this pandemic. We've helped coordinate the logistics for the local election, the primary election. We've worked on reopening plans for municipal offices, fields, and schools. And so I think we have a lot to be proud of. When you look at our numbers compared to some of our neighbors, we are still very low. Although these numbers are high, they're much higher than I would have liked 6 months ago. I believe that through the dedication of the community, the responsiveness of the citizens, and everyone doing the best that they could to take those mitigation steps, as hard as they are, I think that we have a lot to be proud of as we look back over
Mike,
the
I'll
last 6
take
months.
this moment to again thank you as we did at town meeting. I think a lot of it has to do with your steady and strong leadership in this way. You're very good at what you do, and I think people respect you for the guidance you provided us over the last 6 months. It's sincerely appreciated, so thank you for your commitment. I know it takes a lot of your time, and you're still a fire chief.
Correct. I appreciate
It sounds
that.
like your lieutenants miss you a lot.
Deputies, captains, lieutenants.
All of them, so
Yes,
thank you for
absolutely.
that. Yes, indeed.
So, do you have any questions on just the quick update before we get to the one funding request?
I have just one quick question, sort of like a sort of a just the type of testings that are being reported to you. Are they antibody testing, or are they just simply the swab? Like, basically, what I'm asking you is that are the cases that are being reported, by and large, they are active when they are reported to you, or are there some that have been reported that people realize like 6 months, like literally 6 months later, that they had COVID, and then they go on to this list?
So, if you were to look at my data set and you were to see the difference between when a case gets on our radar to when a case clears, it's all over the map. There have been that have been on our active caseload for 5 weeks. I've had several that have come on one day and come off the next. So whether it was a case of someone had tested multiple times and was feeling better, and then based on the initial onset of their symptoms, the public health nurse then cleared them. I can't tell you exactly what people's symptoms are, what people's experiences, because that's all, there's a firewall of separation there.
Yes,
surveillance.
privacy concerns. I understand.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot of data as to whether or not they're doing the spit test or whether they're doing the...
I was just curious if there are some, the types of reports that are coming in, but I understand it's, we're beholden to the data that's been given to us.
Right. If I could just get access to that Maven data, I think I might be able to provide a little bit more level of detail for
You could solve this problem for all of us.
Or at least I could give us more real-time information that would help inform decision-making, which
Sure.
I know was a concern, and I've seen the resolution of the school committee. I heard them when they discussed it during their meeting last Thursday. I did receive a copy of it. I've had the opportunity to review it. Yeah, I'd love for actionable data as well, because right now the age breakdown is under age 20. So that's a broad spectrum. And to date, as of when we had the age breakdown, it only represented 6.25% of the active cases, or the total cases at that time. But still, that's under age 20 is...
It's a big difference.
Is that a freshman in college who just came home from school?
Right.
Or is that a sophomore, or is that a 7th grader?
Right. Well, then it's also like, I mean, I have an 18-month-old who's clearly not going to be able to wear a mask. Is
Right.
that, is it something?
And again, with those numbers, was that back in April during one of the initial surges? Or has that been after folks came home from college, were sent home in May?
Right.
So I'd love more information.
Sure.
And I have asked the state to provide me with access, limited access to our Maven data, and to date, I have not received a response.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Tina.
My only question for you is, so deep in the information given to us for our agenda this evening from the Board of Health were some comments about the volume of workload of the Board of Health employees or the Department of Health employees, staff.
Yes.
So knowing that there's a meeting tomorrow evening, knowing that you will be on that call,
Yes.
I would appreciate them being notified again, I am sure they've received this information, of the availability of CARES Act for an expanded public health mission, so that if our employees if our staff in the Board of Health, Department of Health, are working excessively, as we saw with our IT director responding to virtual remote participation, that they do have an avenue by which they can seek additional funds. I am sure they're well aware of it, but it would make me feel better reading the information that was presented tonight to know that they are reminded of that again tomorrow evening.
I will absolutely remind them of that. They are aware of it. A week and a half ago, the expectation was that tonight I would be bringing to you a request for funding for staffing. From the Board of Health.
Okay, all right.
They shifted their plans.
Okay.
And therefore they withdrew that initial request. They may come back after tomorrow night with
Okay.
a retooled
Okay.
request.
Thank you. Thanks for
Absolutely.
that update.
We discussed the flu clinic change briefly.
Yes.
I would say we're operating under board business, so we may want to, any heavy lifting, wait till next week, but if there's anything else you want to cover?
Did you want to do the funding request for CARES Act, or you want me to hold that for next week, since you've been
Why don't we
done
discuss it
board
this week, unless it's time sensitive, we can wait till
Is
next
it-
week.
It is a time
It
sensitive?
is not. It's covering expenses that we've already incurred, so it
Wait
would
till
just
next
be
week, Mike.
a reclass. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
And I would just reiterate something that was mentioned in your absence, if we could also plan for next week for a full town meeting update from the emergency management perspective,
Yes,
that would be appreciated.
absolutely.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, Mike, thanks so much. Appreciate
you.
you coming over, as always.
Sorry
Great
to
job.
delay you.
Oh, understandable.
Appreciate it.
I will now.
Always a pleasure having you.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Good evening, Holliston. It is now 8:30. We will catch you later. Thank you very much. Good night.